Egypt and Cyprus call for Syria's unity, ceasefire in Gaza and regional stability efforts. The UN's envoy to Syria urges inclusive transition, sanctions relief and reconstruction in Syria. And the World Bank highlights the severe damage inflicted on Palestine's financial system since October 7, 2023. You're watching Qnews. Welcome, and we begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Syria. Egypt and Cyprus have reaffirmed their desire to preserve Syria's unity and advance an inclusive political process. That came as Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Cyprus President Nikos Christodoulidis held a phone call where they addressed regional issues. President el-Sisi called for a swift Gaza ceasefire, a detainee exchange and unrestricted humanitarian aid. President Christodoulidis praised Egypt's stabilizing efforts to prevent further Middle East escalation. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, said that concrete movement on an inclusive political transition in Syria will be key in ensuring the country gets the economic support it needs. Pedersen added that there is a clear international willingness to engage. He highlighted that the needs are immense and could only be addressed with broad support, including a smooth end to sanctions, appropriate action on designations, and full reconstruction. The UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Tom Fletcher has emphasized Syria's dire humanitarian crisis, citing 17 million people who need aid and 1 million who have been displaced in the past few weeks. Fletcher added that essential services, schools and humanitarian operations were disrupted and worsened by closed borders. He added that efforts to stabilize conditions include resumed aid, coordination improvements and collaboration across conflict lines. The UN has called on the international community to seize the opportunity to aid Syria's recovery. The head of a UN investigative body has written to Syria's new authorities to express its willingness to travel to Syria to secure evidence that could implicate top officials of the former government. The head of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism said its first priority would be to scoop the extent of the issue, evaluated the extent of its access and potential evidence, and then see how they could be best assisting in preserving that.
With hope is a stated awareness from the transitional authorities and from Syrian civil society.
Moving on to Syria, the head of Syria's transitional government, Mohammed al-Bashir, has announced plans to restructure the Ministry of Defense and called for the international community to lift sanctions and release frozen funds. Al-Bashir emphasized the government's focus on maintaining services, security and stability, while expressing disappointment over international neglect. He also stressed the need for accountability regarding past crimes and encouraged displaced Syrians to return, invest and contribute to the nation's rebuilding efforts, with a focus on unity and justice. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has stated that the situation in Syria remains volatile, with the EU closely monitoring developments. Speaking alongside Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, von der Leyen emphasized that while the collapse of Assad's regime offers hope for the Syrian people, security risks persist. She stressed the importance of protecting Syria's unity and minorities, reaffirmed Europe's commitment to rebuilding, and emphasized the need for safe and voluntary refuge returns.
To resuming discussions on a modernized customs union. We both have a lot to gain here. However, as we discussed, progress will require stronger efforts.
The French flag has been raised over France's embassy in Damascus, marking its reopening after 12 years. Reports suggest a French delegation will visit Syria, holding meetings with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham officials. The international community is closely monitoring whether Syria's new leaders can stabilize the country and prevent further violence. British Foreign Minister David Lammy has confirmed that senior UK officials will meet Syria's interim authorities and civil society groups in Damascus this week. Speaking at a news conference with his Australian counterpart Penny Wong, Lammy welcomed a court ruling naming a suspected Chinese agent. Wong emphasized unwavering support for Ukraine from the UK and Australia.
Syrian authorities and members of civil society groups in Syria. And it
Iran's foreign ministry has announced that reopening its embassy in Damascus requires necessary arrangements. Foreign Ministry spokesperson confirmed the embassy's reopening is on the agenda and will proceed once the required conditions are met. He also stated that Israel is violating Syrian sovereignty and breaching the ceasefire agreement. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has stated that Turkey will play a crucial role in Syria's future following the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad's government. Earlier, Turkey reopened its embassy in Damascus, 2 days after its intelligence chief visited the Syrian capital.
Right now, Syria has a lot of, there's a lot of indefinites. Nobody knows what's going to happen with Syria. But I think Turkey is going to hold the key to Syria, actually. I don't think you've heard that.
And now to Rana Al-Qassas in our newsroom for more on this matter. Rana.
Thank you very much, Karim. And for further analysis on the situation in Syria, we're joined from Cairo by writer and political researcher Dr. Bashir Abdel Fattah. A very warm welcome, sir, and welcome to Q News.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So, Sir Geir Pedersen highlighted the importance of an inclusive political transition in Syria for economic support. What concrete steps are needed to move this process forward?
As we know, Syria, after al-Assad regime collapse, now trying to cross the transitional era, which is very important and very also delicate. So, Syrian people cannot overcome such a challenge without international and Arab support, economic and political and security support to Syria. The first step in this support is lifting the sanctions or the embargo on Syria, because the Syrian economy is blooding and is collapsed before al-Assad escape. So lifting the sanctions is very important because Syria is receiving millions of refugees who left Syria during the revolution against Assad. So the new government, transitional government in Syria, is in a real need to the economic support for this to deal with such a challenge. In addition to that, security support is very important because we need the experience of the international community how to involve or integrate the military groups in Syria in the army, for example, or the security regime in Syria in the next days. And the international experience is very important in that sense, under the supervision of the United Nations.
Perfect. Sir, Resolution 2020-2254 seems to be the blueprint for any future UN-mediated transition. However, given the substantial shift of events, do you see it still applicate, sir, as is? Or does it need to be amended by the Security Council to respond more to the recent developments?
Yes, I think the Security Council Resolution 2254 is very important, and we can take it as a base for any reform or any establishment of the new regime in Syria. But Al-Shara said that this resolution is now need off because
so it's not, sir, it's not applicate now.
Yes, it is not applicable now. He thinks so because the resolution contained Al-Assad regime and the political opposition in establishing a new regime in Syria. And now Assad regime is collapsed, so we need a new resolution for that. In addition to that, the resolution said you should stop any military actions except the actions against the terrorist groups. And still, Jabhat al-Nusra is considered as a terrorist group. So they need an amendment to the resolution for this issue as well. In addition to that, we have to refer to the Israeli violation to the Security Council regime 338 for 1967. As you know, Israel is trying to occupy a new territories in Syria, and it destroyed as well the military forces of the Syrian government. So they are talking about an amendment of the resolution to 254 or to issue a new resolution for Syria, which can be applicable and up to date with the new status quo in Syria.
Okay, Syria's transitional government has called for lifting sanctions and releasing frozen funds. Do you see international willingness to take these steps, and what are the challenges that will face them, sir?
The international community policy towards the transitional government in Syria, based on conditions, they say we can lift the sanctions on Syria, but we should see first a step from the transitional government according to minorities, according to human rights, democracy, and to make some sort of deconnection with the terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So I think they are willing to do that. The West is willing to do that, but after some signals from the new government or the transitional government in Syria to take actions in order to bridge trust with the international community through respecting the rules and the rights of minorities, democracy, human rights, and so on.
So, sir, you see a future release of frozen funds and lifting of sanctions?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because you cannot. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. What
leave Syria in such circumstances.
Okay, yeah, that was the writer and political researcher, Dr. Bashir Abdel Fattah. Thank you very much for your in-depth and insight knowledge. Thank you very much. And now, back again to you, Karim Hatem.
Thank you very much, Rana. And now we move to the latest developments in Gaza. An Egyptian source has denied media reports about an anticipated visit by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Cairo. The World Bank Group has stated that since October 7, 2023, the financial system in Gaza and the West Bank has faced severe disruptions and damages. The World Bank and United Nations Interim Damage Assessment updated to July 2024 figures estimates $14.2 million in damages to the financial sector in Gaza between October and the end of January 2024. This includes the damage or destruction of 93% of bank branches in Gaza, as well as 88% of microfinance institutions, most money changers, and 88% of insurance companies. Dozens of Palestinian residents were suffocated by tear gas during an Israeli military raid into the town of Beit Furek, east of Nablus. According to local sources, Israeli forces stormed the town of Beit Furek, triggering confrontations with the residents. Forces attacked residents with tear gas and sound bombs during the confrontations, causing dozens of people to suffocate. The town of Beit Furek has been subjected to frequent daily raids, often leading to violent confrontations. Israeli occupation forces have stormed a Palestinian neighborhood located on the southeastern of Ramallah and Al-Bira Governorate. Eyewitnesses reported that Israeli forces raided several areas in the neighborhood, seizing the camera footage of several homes and shops. According to the witnesses, forces attacked residents with tear gas and sound bombs. An Israeli Knesset member from the Likud party has proposed a draft law to allow freedom of movement for Israelis within the Gaza Strip. The new proposal builds on a law passed in March to cancel plans for Israel to withdraw from 4 northern West Bank settlements as part of the 2005 Gaza disengagement. Recently, Likud and religious Zionism Knesset members, alongside settler leaders, formed a group to repeal the Gaza disengagement law, aiming to legitimize the recolonization of Palestinian territories. Egyptian and Qatari efforts are intensifying to broker a ceasefire in Gaza. Egypt continues its commitment to supporting the Palestinian cause, pushing for a ceasefire and ensuring humanitarian aid access. Earlier, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry urged the international community to guarantee unconditional aid delivery as conditions deteriorate. An Israeli delegation visited Cairo on December 10 for negotiations. Egypt, Qatar and the US are mediating between Israel and Hamas to end the prolonged conflict. Palestinian UN Ambassador Riyad Mansour has sent letters to the UN Secretary General, the Security Council President and the General Assembly President, urging accountability for Israel's action in occupied Palestinian territories. Mansour has further highlighted the suffering of Palestinians from mass killings, displacement, kidnappings, imprisonment, collective punishment and famine under the Israeli siege. He called for urgent action to end the massacre and starvation in Gaza and demanded Israel to be held accountable for war crimes, including East Jerusalem.
We condemn this crime. We condemn those who committed these crimes, particularly.
And now to the latest developments of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia's investigative committee has announced that a bomb concealed in an electric scooter, killed the head of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, in Moscow. Kirillov and his assistant were killed near an apartment building southeast of the Kremlin. Russian telegram channels shared images of the aftermath, showing 2 bodies and a debris. A criminal investigation has been launched into the attack. Russia has launched an investigation into the killing of the head of the nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, and his assistant. The investigative committee opened a criminal case into their deaths. The Security Service of Ukraine claimed responsibility, stating they conducted a special operation to kill Kirillov. Russian Duma Speaker has stressed that those responsible for General Igor Kirillov's assassination must be punished. Russia's Security Council Deputy Chair Dmitry Medvedev warned Ukraine's military and political leadership of inevitable retaliation. Reports indicated that Ukrainian intelligence carried out the operation, which killed Kirillov in Moscow. Russian investigators confirmed his death resulted from an explosion, and criminal investigation is underway. Medvedev accused Ukraine of prolonging the war despite inevitable defeat. Russia's Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev has warned of imminent revenge against Ukraine for killing a top Russian general. Speaking at a meeting of senior Russian officials, Medvedev said the investigators must find the killers in Russia. He added that Russia must do everything to destroy the patrons in Kiev.
Мы все здесь присутствующие за этим столом знали его и как.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has met President Volodymyr Zelensky in the West Ukrainian city of Lviv. The 2 leaders discussed Ukraine's pledge for NATO membership. In a press conference after the meeting, Tusk said Poland would do everything in its power to make Ukraine's NATO membership a real possibility. Additionally, Zelensky said that the question of deployment of foreign peacekeeping troops in Ukraine could potentially be raised at a meeting of the leaders of Germany, France, Poland, NATO and others in Brussels. Ukraine's top commander, Oleksiy Skirsky, says Moscow has intensified attacks on Ukrainian forces in the regions of Kursk and Donetsk. He also said that this is the 3rd day that the enemy is conducting intensive assaults in the Kursk region. He added that Russia is actively using North Korean troops who are taking significant losses. Russia has claimed that its forces hit multiple Ukrainian military targets, including settlements, ammunition depots and airfield infrastructure. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported shooting down dozens of Russian drones. The Ukrainian General Staff stated that its forces had repelled over 200 Russian attacks, maintaining their positions on the front lines. Earlier, the Ukrainian Air Force also downed numerous Russian drones amid ongoing clashes with Russian forces. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Egypt and Cyprus call for Syria's unity, ceasefire in Gaza and regional stability efforts. UN's envoy to Syria urges inclusive transition, sanctions, relief and reconstruction in Syria. The World Bank highlights the severe damage inflicted on Palestine's financial system since October 7, 2023. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.
you.